From this simple and perfect shape emerges an animal of such variety and beauty. It has captured our imagination, inspired our reverence, and taught us the secret of flight. We've always yearned to be free as a bird, and our fascination with these princes of the skies is as ageless as humanity itself. From this protective shell, a chick prepares to hatch, continuing a cycle that has been evolving and repeating itself for millions of years. 200 million years ago, there were no birds. Insects were the only flying creatures. Then came the pterodactyl, a giant flying reptile with wings made of membranes. But membranes were easily torn and couldn't be repaired. During the heyday of the pterodactyl, evolution solved this problem with the feather, one of nature's greatest innovations. The first feathered creature that we know of, the first bird, was Archaeopteryx, which lived 150 million years ago. Its reptile-like teeth and tail provide an evolutionary link between flying reptiles and the feather-covered bodies of birds. From Archaeopteryx and its descendants came the 8,500 species of birds that currently populate the Earth. A determined birdwatcher setting out to see each and every species of bird would have to observe a new species every day for the next 23 years. There are now about 500 billion birds in the world. A single fertile cell surrounded by yolk soon divides and multiplies, so that after only a few days, the heartbeat is discernible. Halfway through development, limbs begin to take shape. Before the chick can crack the egg, it must turn itself and break the air sac. After filling its lungs with air for the first time, the chick may call to its mother, signaling to her to prepare for the onset of hatching. From the faintest chirp inside an egg to the round-the-clock song of a nightingale, the elaborate language of birds far surpasses that of humans. Poets would have us believe that a singing bird is proclaiming its happiness, but birdsong has more to do with proclaiming territory. Like this bellbird, whose call can be heard up to 2.5 miles away. Birdsong is also used to attract a mate. The song of the male lyrebird is actually a medley of borrowed tunes. 80% of its song is mimicry of other birds. The repertoire can even include barking dogs. And with tail feathers shaped like a Greek lyre, it's not difficult to work out the origin of its musical name. Perhaps the most unmusical bird is the raven. One myth offers an explanation of the raven's rasping call. It was sent by the gods to bring water for an offering. The raven set off as instructed, but tarried a while, waiting for some figs to ripen. Returning late with the water, the gods punished the raven by condemning it to eternal thirst. In other myths, the raven is a more obedient servant. The Norse god Odin is often depicted with a raven on each shoulder. It was believed these ravens flew around the world every day and reported to him what they had seen. The bird as gossip survives to this day in the phrase, "A little bird told me." As well as couriers of scandal, birds were also seen as omens. A pure white bird is so rare that seeing one was considered a portent of death. This may have had to do with the cry of the swan, so mournful that for a long time it was believed the swan sang as it died. The belief proved false. but we still refer to someone's final act as their swan song. How does this creature that has given flight to our imagination become airborne? How does a bird fly? Bone structure, metabolic rate, wing structure, and the unique design of the feather all play a part in the bird's ability to fly. The lighter the material, the easier it is to get off the ground. The first human flyers learned this through numerous weighty experiments. Bones are heavy, and to move them takes large muscles. But in order to fly, birds can't afford the excess baggage of large muscles. So they reduce their need for muscle by having lighter bones. A land animal's bone consists of a heavy honeycomb of tissue. A bird's bone is almost hollow and reinforced with lightweight struts. And less bone requires less muscle, very handy when it comes to defying gravity and performing takeoff, the most difficult stage of flight. And takeoff is the moment that separates the flyers from the walkers. But with so little muscle, how can a bird be so active and not suffer from exhaustion? Actually, some do. The pheasant can only take off a few times before it becomes exhausted and incapable of flight. Most birds, however, can sustain long periods of hyperactivity. The hummingbird feeds while beating its wings up to 80 times a second. But to sustain such levels of energy, birds must take in large amounts of food. To eat like a bird is actually to have a voracious appetite. A hatching chick consumes the egg's yolk, now a marble-sized sack of food attached to its belly. It provides the chick with energy to get through the most exhausting day of its life. Once fully grown, a small bird may consume its body weight in food every day. That's about 300 small insects. A larger bird of prey consumes up to a third of its body weight per day. And the equivalent for the average human? 100 hamburgers would do it. With so many calories to burn, it's no wonder birds have the highest body temperature of all warm-blooded animals. And their blood hurtles around their bodies at rates that would kill a person. Our resting heart rate is about 60 beats per minute. A robin's heart beats at 600 times a minute. It's this ability to deliver an immense amount of energy to the wing, combined with the lightness of design, which allows a bird to lift off the ground and stay there. Like the swimmer through water, a bird pushes against the medium of air to fly. The wing is light, strong, and extremely flexible, allowing the bird to work against or with the air. Birds can sit on the wind, their wings held on the air currents, or catch rising pockets of warm air called thermals, riding them like invisible escalators to tremendous heights. Frigate birds depend on air currents to save them from disaster. They feed on fish, but their wings are not waterproof. If they landed on the water, they could drown. So they always fish into the wind and use the airflow to lift them away from the surface and back up to the safe haven of a rising thermal. Just as birds push against the air to achieve flight, they push against the air to end it, using their wings like brakes. Even though human flying machines have conquered the basics of flying, birds possess one skill that our flying machines will never master: self-repair. Because of the wear and tear of flight, any flying machine needs constant maintenance. A bird is no different. To pass inspection, a feather must provide a smooth, streamlined surface for air to flow over. But breaks in a feather can occur between the hundreds of barbs attached to the shaft, which are zipped together by hundreds of barb balls. When a bird preens, it is zipping up the gaps in its feathers. But keeping its feathers airworthy is just one task in preening. This stork is collecting oil from a preen gland and spreading it over its feathers. Oil acts as a waterproofing agent for water birds, turning them into waterproof vessels. The droplets of water simply slide across the surface of the feathers like rainwater off a shingled roof, or water off a duck's back. All ducklings can float within 24 hours of birth, but take 2 to 3 weeks to grow proper waterproof feathers. This duckling has broken through the shell using an egg tooth, a small projection on its beak, and has begun pushing itself out. For the ancient Egyptians, the sight of a young bird breaking out of the shell helped explain the origins of the universe. One myth held that the god Noom took the mud of the Nile and made a cosmic egg from which the cosmos was hatched. Today, the association of the egg as a course of new life persists in the Christian celebration of Easter. The Easter egg is a symbol of Christ's tomb from which he emerged at the resurrection. And it's no coincidence that Easter takes place in the spring, the time of renewal, the time in which migrating birds fly great distances to their place of renewal, breeding grounds. The king of the long haul is the Arctic tern. Each year, these birds migrate from pole to pole. That's over 8,500 miles one way. During the journey south, they have the benefit of almost perpetual daylight and feed and even sleep on the wing. After a non-stop flight lasting over 2.5 months, they finally arrive at their breeding grounds in late April, only to set off again in July. In temperate climates, the arrival of spring and the spectacle of huge flocks of geese flying overhead are inseparable. In ancient cultures, humans who knew nothing of migration and only saw geese leave before winter and return in the spring believed that geese literally carried the spring with them. The belief gave rise to goose myths and ceremonies in ancient Greece and Japan, and gave the goose special powers in folklore because of its association with spring, fertility, and good fortune. In many cultures, even though the goose has been replaced by the turkey, The eating of a bird on holidays harkens back to these beliefs. And a bird's collarbone or wishbone can still fulfill our greatest longings. Even the cuckoo, another spring arrival associated with the changing seasons, is still married to our concept of time. The penguin is identified with a very different season, winter. But the familiar image of these ice-bound waddlers belies their true ability. For penguins do their flying underwater, and not just Arctic waters. Here in the warm waters of the Pacific Islands, the Galapagos penguins fly through the sea with extreme agility, using their flippers like wings. But there are birds that are truly flightless. The wings of an ostrich serve little purpose. For the ostrich is the world's heaviest bird. At 260 pounds, it is permanently grounded. It's believed ostriches evolved at a time when food was so plentiful, flight was unnecessary. And with the ability to run up to 40 miles per hour, making it the fastest two-legged animal on Earth, the ostrich stands a pretty good chance of leaving most predators in the dust. Ornithologists, scientists who study birds, calculate that no bird weighing more than 40 pounds could ever be capable of flight. The secretary bird, with a flying weight of 9 pounds, derives its name from the resemblance of its head feathers to quill pens used by secretaries of another era. Most recently, it's been suggested that the name is a corruption of the Arabic securitaire, meaning hunter bird. Although this hunter bird is a very capable flyer, its most deadly weapon is a kick that kills and tenderizes at the same time. Until they are fully grown, flightless birds need constant protection. With predators such as this Egyptian vulture lurking in the wings, it's no wonder that ostrich eggs have evolved a thick shell to protect them from hungry mouths. No beak could break through this. But a stone can, and so the Egyptian vulture has cracked the problem by learning to use a tool. This ability to conquer nature's defenses by using a tool earns the vulture a place among the most intelligent of birds. At the other end of the scale, looking wise is not being wise. The owl is actually one of the least intelligent birds, but its ability to see in the dark makes it an emblem of clairvoyance in Mexico and a symbol of death in ancient Egyptian tombs. Neither psychic nor funereal, the owl is a creature with highly developed senses. An owl's eyes are especially adapted for night vision, packed with light-sensitive rods. At the moment of attack, the eyes actually close, and the owl relies on its sensitive talons to zero in on the exact position of its target. It's not the wisdom of the owl, but the tools of its trade that account for its success. Like human tools, a bird's beak performs a variety of tasks, but unlike humans, they never lose them. The short, sharp beaks of woodpeckers are used like drills to make nests for their young, but are primarily used for boring for food. As form follows function, the shape of a bird's beak is determined by its diet. The fruit-eating macaw needs to supplement its diet with kaolin and uses its beak like a pick on rock. The greatest variety of beaks is found among water birds. tweezers for probing the mud, spears for harpooning fish and eels. A pelican's pouch is a highly elastic scoop, expanding underwater to accommodate up to 30 pints of water with its catch. The flamingo uses its sieve-like beak to dredge the mud for the microscopic crustaceans which contain a dye that keeps flamingo feathers pink. And the skimmer bird, with a protruding lower beak, literally skims on the wing. But the most unusual and beguiling of beaks must belong to the toucan. It may be an impressive showpiece, but makes a hazardous piece of cutlery, requiring a long, wire-like tongue to flick food down its throat. Enjoying the fruit of its labors, the chick makes its small but momentous entrance into the world. Only to face the next obstacle. After 30 days in the shell, stretching and straightening its egg-shaped body is no easy feat. The wax coating which protected the duckling's feathers in the shell starts to dry immediately, allowing the feathers to fluff up and insulate the tiny newborn. All birds have feathers, and no other creatures possess them. To hold or wear the bird's feathers is to possess its power. The Central American Aztecs are just one of the many cultures that have used feathers to adorn their ceremonial headdresses. Birds also use their feathers for ceremonial occasions, such as courtship. The riot of color in a peacock's tail is focused on one purpose: attracting a mate. And the rules of courtship in any society, bird or human, can be quite a performance. The fine art of courtship is followed by the more practical art of nesting. Perhaps one of the most unusual nest builders is the African weaver bird. It actually sews threads with its beak and ties knots to weave the nest, which includes a long entrance tube to deter unwelcome visitors. Copying nest builders probably led to the first human attempts at basketry, as well as pottery. Collecting their building materials from nearby rivers, cliff swallows construct their nests from mud. These masons of the bird world meticulously fashion layer upon layer, making sure the mixture is just the right consistency, especially important when plastering the roof. And there are some who say that it was the golden bowerbird that introduced us to interior design. To attract a female, the male finishes off his nest by decorating it with flowers and feathers. His discerning eye pays attention to every detail with an aesthetic sense that any artist would envy. And some culinary artists do. The Chinese have been making bird's nest soup for centuries. The key ingredient is the nest of the cave swiftlet, which is mostly made of saliva and collected from the caves of Borneo. The soup may be a rare and expensive delicacy, but has little nutritional value or taste. Ground nesting birds like this duckling hatch in a more developed state than most birds. Being on the ground makes them easy prey for predators, so the sooner they're capable of flight, the greater their chances of survival. But first, this chick has to learn to stand, and finding your feet for the first time can prove an exhausting business. For its tree-dwelling cousins, leaving the nest can be just as perilous as leaving the shell. Birds have to learn to fly just as we have to learn to walk by using the age-old method of trial and error. With its first unsteady steps, the duckling sets out on life's journey. Soon it will achieve the perfection of feathered flight first mastered by its ancestor, Archaeopteryx. As long as birds reach for the heavens, our imagination will soar along with them. How to experience the world as never before. Take a giant leap beyond the imagination into the super real to explore nature and the culture, myth, and legend that surround it. To see animals as they really are, we need to strip away their natural surroundings. For Eyewitness, the filmmakers designed a whole new environment where this could happen. The Eyewitness Museum, created to house a limitless range of subjects under one electronically generated roof. Let's see how the museum was built. Like most buildings, this one started out with careful planning. What should be the shape of the building? How many floors? How many rooms? In an electronic building, the camera can fly in any direction, defying gravity. The objects in the museum also need to be built. Once programmed into the computer, the plane is as good as real and can be lit and viewed from any angle. The final choice rests with the designer. In the museum, we can recreate the past. The computer can create a dinosaur as convincingly as it can an airplane. Now we have an exciting building and models, but there's more to come. Real animals. Incorporating live action into this electronic world was the biggest challenge. Just to build the underwater room took weeks, combining layers of film, graphics, and specially shot fish edited together to create the finished effect. And that was only the beginning. Each of the 13 eyewitness programs set out to capture the essence of its subject animal. In Horse, the role the animal has played in history and culture is a central theme, so Alexander the Great and Napoleon were invited into the eyewitness studio. But in order to tell the story of Paul Revere's midnight ride, the cameras were taken into a real forest. To bring a legend to life was one challenge. To recreate a myth was even more difficult. To make a flying horse, two elements were needed: a silhouetted horse filmed at sunset, and the flapping wings of a swan. In the edit, the wings of the swan were superimposed onto the back of the horse to create an illusion of Pegasus in flight. Color added the finishing touches. But the anatomy of an ordinary horse is just as wondrous. In fish, the salmon was chosen as the central animal. The biggest challenge in this program was how to photograph underwater creatures against a clean white background. Filming began first on a salmon farm to provide backgrounds of rushing water. A camera tied to a stick is hardly high-tech, but it does the job. To photograph the fish, a huge tank was set up to create a current in which the fish could swim. The results were good, but far from perfect. To achieve a crystal clear image, it was decided to adopt a completely new approach. Take the fish to the eyewitness studio. A donut-shaped flow tank was built in the studio. Mostly metal, it had one section made of glass for filming the salmon. This time, the conditions would be perfect to obtain the best possible photographs of the fish. On filling the tank, it was found that plumbing was not the team's strong point. The main concern was, would the fish be happy in the flow tank? To everyone's delight, when the first salmon was dropped in, it immediately began to swim against the current. It seemed like all the hard work was going to pay off. A larger fish was dropped in, and it too seemed content. The success of filming in a flow tank relies totally on adjusting the flow of water around the tank so that fish are comfortable swimming against the current. Finally, a perfect shot of a fish against a blue background was achieved. Using special effects, one fish can become many fish, and blue can become white. How do you explain how a fish moves through water? With a little help from the director, the model could demonstrate the perfect S-wriggle. The fish, of course, don't need a director. To turn a beetle into a bug for the insect program, the process known as morphing was used. First, the outline of the rhino beetle and the car were carefully plotted. Then legs had to be added separately, because if they were included in the morph, they would spoil the clean transition. The result in slow motion shows a car growing 6 legs before becoming an insect. This effect took around 3 days to accomplish, and in its final form lasts about 4 seconds. But no computer could create an animal as incredible as a praying mantis. Or architecture as impressive as this termite skyscraper, which on a human scale would be 2 miles high. It ventilates a sophisticated network of chambers and tunnels beneath the ground, which houses up to 5 million termites and one massive queen, who lays as many as 30,000 eggs every day. An exceptional opening shot was needed for another program, Skeleton. The director decided to create this optical illusion in 3 dimensions. A perfect introduction to the program's hero, Smedley. Smedley was created using 3D computer-generated graphics. Within the computer, he could do just about anything, walk at different speeds. React. Or refuse to cooperate. Smedley needed his own space in the museum. In the studio, a skeleton room was constructed with every creature comfort. Including a good strong hook on the door which would prove useful during the program. Back at the computer, Smedley was placed carefully in his surroundings. When Smedley escapes from his skeletal room, the production manager lent him a helping boot. Once out, he was free to explore the Eyewitness Museum. During the making of the series, painting things white became a way of life. In Cat, all the preparation had to be complete before the animals were let out onto the set. Big cats demand respect from everyone, especially the cameraman, who could not leave his box while the tigers were out. The cats took half an hour or so to acclimatize themselves before work could begin.
Let him walk out, let him walk out.
They were persuaded to leap onto the cameraman's box. This took some practice, with encouragement and reward. The resulting shot more than justified the time spent. But this shot came as a surprise to everyone, especially the cat. Throughout history, cats have been associated with myth and superstition, the stuff of dreams. A fascinating combination of strength and ruthlessness with beauty and grace. Even the domestic cat, a companion to humans since ancient Egyptian times, retains the spirit of the wild. The opening of the bird program. The egg was first exploded with compressed air and filmed at high speed to create slow motion. The macaws had to be filmed against a neutral background, a different color than the plumage, difficult with one of the most colorful birds in nature. Once the macaws were separated from the background, they could be placed anywhere on the screen in any size, and gradually multiplied. Eventually, they filled the egg. Filming in the Eyewitness studio, the art department recreated a realistic forest set against a stark white background. By tracking across the set, the studio is transformed into woodland. The set had to convince not only the viewer, but the animals placed in it. In this case, a pheasant and a fox supplied by an animal sanctuary who felt quite at home on the set. Although the fox was not allowed to get as close to the pheasant as he would have liked. While pheasants can fly only a very short distance, capturing the beauty of these marathon flyers required training and filming by specialists. The terror of the deep. Yet the beauty of these creatures has long been overlooked, and the shark program puts their reputation into perspective. By filming the animals against a neutral blue, the program makers could take sharks out of their natural element. Using similar electronic techniques to those used for the exploding egg, the shark could erupt from the volcano, illustrating an ancient Hawaiian myth that the volcano gave life to the shark. In the amphibian program, the myth of the princess and the frog is reversed with another morph. There are many superstitions surrounding frogs and toads. Perhaps one of the strangest is that toads can be found inside rocks split by lightning. The special effects team designed a rock made of two tightly fitting halves of fiberglass. The atmosphere was provided by dry ice, and the rock was blown apart using compressed air. A small explosive charge provided the flash. Of course, the toads were added later. Elephant presented a bigger challenge to the film crew. A camera rig called a hothead was used. The camera is moved by remote control and mounted on a 20-foot-long crane. Everything had to be ready before this star walked on the set. The hothead rig needed 6 people working in close harmony to the director's instructions. Each move was painstakingly rehearsed before the animal arrived. The camera operator controls the camera with 2 wheels and checks the shot through a monitor. The baby African elephant was everyone's favorite, but would it be afraid of the mouse?
Bring in the mouse. And action, Flora.
Far from shying away, the elephant was keen to make the mouse's acquaintance. But the mouse wasn't so keen and sought the sanctuary of the camera. Animation was required instead to portray the myth. Various kinds of animation were used in Dinosaur. The dinosaurs in the Eyewitness Museum were brought to life inside a 3D graphics computer. Just like paleontologists, the designers started with the skeletons. One way of illustrating the scale of these animals needed 2 elements: live-action earth-moving machinery and animated models. The editor later combined the 2 images to compare the mechanics of the machines with the biomechanics of the dinosaurs. In the studio, a full-size Stegosaurus tail was built from latex, steel, and fiberglass. The model was used in a shot that demonstrated the power of the animal's tail by crashing through a corrugated iron fence. The dinosaur hero Legs was made of softer stuff, plasticine. This made him very adaptable, and he could race through millions of years of evolution in less than a minute. It took a little longer to show young Maiasaura hatching. The eggs were laid in circular nests 6 feet across, containing 20 to 25 eggs. The adults shared nesting, feeding, and babysitting duties once the eggs were hatched. Maiasaura means good mother lizard. Less realistic was the dinosaur race. Operated with strings and wires, it was designed to demonstrate the speed of a Tyrannosaurus relative to man, although it's unlikely that the man would finish the race. Hardly high-tech, but a lot of fun.
Turn over.
For Jungle, the art director was asked to build a rainforest inside the Eyewitness studio. He thought it was a joke, at first. After extensive planning, the whole thing happened in 2 days. Tree trunks, both real and manufactured, were put into position. Experts had flown in bushes, flowers, and other plants from all over the world. Vines were attached to the tree trunks. And a carpet of ground vegetation was laid out. Once built, the set had to be made secure. Real animals would be used in filming, so close weave nets were fitted over a scaffold frame. The squirrel monkeys used were provided by a primate sanctuary in Sussex, England. When the monkeys were introduced to the set, they seemed immediately at home, clambering up the branches and stopping for a drink. For these monkeys, it was their first glimpse of the rainforest. These animals had been hand-raised as pets and then cared for by the sanctuary when their owners found them too much to handle. Squirrel monkeys are very inquisitive, and without the nets, they would have run riot all over the studio. In the shots used for the program, the netting was removed electronically to give a clean white background. Nature's version of a high-rise, the rainforest, was displayed as a multi-layer graphic with a watery basement, the ground floor, the understory, middle story, the upper story or canopy, and the emergent zone. The jungle may be a remote place to most people, but its products are used every day all over the world. Filming a gecko through glass, the program makers of Reptile were able to demonstrate its unique grip. Reptiles are one of the oldest animal groups. A crocodile god of fertility, Sobek, was worshipped by the ancient Egyptians. But how did some lizards evolve into snakes? In the Eyewitness Museum's X-ray room, this was graphically illustrated with the use of 3D computer animation. By plotting the changes on a computer, millions of years of evolution were shown in a matter of seconds. Another electronic process was used to tell a shorter story. One of nature's greatest escape tricks is that of the lizard who sheds its tail. But this time, it was not really the snake who removed the lizard's tail, but an image manipulation computer called HOW. HOW also provided the fire. At first, filming for the dog program looked like complete chaos. Only Connell, the hero, behaved like a true professional. But the director knew exactly what she wanted, and after much perseverance, the shots began to take shape. And with a little help from their owners, each dog gave a perfect performance. nearly. In the final edit, it all came together to create the perfect dog dance. As it began, so the show ends in the Eyewitness Museum, where anything can happen.
Clear, effortless, accurate, accessible, engaging, informative. When you want to know everything about anything, Eyewitness has it all. Now available on DVD. Eyewitness, DK's classic series for children and young adults, began publication in 1988 to wide acclaim from parents, teachers, and the press. The New York Times calls Eyewitness a mini-museum between the covers of a book. And New Scientist says, Eyewitness draws the reader in with gorgeous pictures, then painlessly drip-feeds information. Newsweek said, the folks at DK have almost single-handedly rejuvenated, if not reinvented, the often moribund world of non-fiction books for children. Now, with more than 150 titles in print, and more than 50 million copies sold, the Eyewitness series is the ultimate visual information source for the 21st century. Every volume in the series, ranging in subjects from science and history to technology and geography to art and culture, has informed, excited, and inspired children and adults alike. Eyewitness books, and now DVDs, provide easy access to information for projects, reference, or discovery. Look for Eyewitness books and DVDs wherever books are sold.